Welcome to the Spotlight Series. I'm your host, Scott Nerney. We're live at the Coesit Inn Tuesday night. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. There's a lot of great content here that you want to reflect back on and pass on to your friends. Amy Mackin is our guest today. Welcome. Published author with a memoir I want to hear all about. So let's talk a little bit about your background. People get to know you before we talk about Henry and your book.
Okay. I am a writer, mother of three. I actually I did my education a little bit non-traditionally, so I've got my degrees later in life.
Okay.
And have been working in writing research communications mostly at different, mostly for nonprofits, for healthcare facilities, and now universities.
And a mother of three, congratulations.
Thanks. Yes, and they're all grown up now, which is nice. So the last one is in college. So
nice.
Yeah, a little bit of an empty nest happening now.
That's okay. Time to downsize before they move back in.
Exactly. You got it.
So the subject of your book is about Henry. So tell us about Henry.
Okay. So Henry is my middle son. I have, Henry has an older sister and younger brother.
You can name them because they'll be mad if you don't.
Well, it's funny because Henry is not his real name, and one of the conditions of the,
I see. Right.
So my son supported me writing this book, but wanted me to change the names, which I was glad to do. So I changed the names of everyone except my husband and I.
Okay.
And yeah, so Henry was about 16 months old when he was diagnosed with developmental delays. And that was sort of an inflection point for us that led us on this journey of learning about early intervention services and how special education works in my home state of Massachusetts, although it works similar, around the country.
So when there's a lot of buzz terms out there that people typically only hear about the education process when we're talking about budgets, because it's expensive to have IEP, independent educational plan, or specialized needs care. Sometimes it's just special focused or one-on-one teaching. And, maybe you could kind of shed a light on what Henry had to go through for that.
Okay, so Henry, he was on an individualized education program, or IEP.
Yep.
And I think there is a lot of misunderstanding about how that works and also how it's funded.
Sure.
So it's it came out of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, that was passed originally in 1975. And that law was rooted in the civil rights, the civil rights movement, but specifically the Brown versus Board of Education ruling. And so some families got together in the early 1970s, and two big court cases were brought. And one was in Pennsylvania, one was in Washington, D.C. And these parents basically argued that their kids could benefit from a free public education that they were being denied because of a disability their kids had, one or another disability. Because up until then, there was no rule that kids with a disability had any entitlement to a public education. And so that's where it began. And at the time, Congress basically said they were going to fund, the federal government would fund 40% of the cost of educating a child with disabilities. That promise has never been fulfilled, and as we sit here today, it's about 14.5% is what's being funded. So that puts a burden on essentially local districts, and the state have to make that up. And oftentimes so do families, because what happens is the budgets aren't there to really give a lot of students what they need. And that's what happened with Henry. Henry had a complex kind of diagnosis in that he was a bright, motivated student, but he struggled a lot socially. And it was difficult to get him the services he needed. Our school didn't have any kind of social skills programming at all. And several of the things that were recommended he was seeing a developmental medicine team at a Boston hospital. A lot of the things that they recommended, the schools either didn't have staff to offer or didn't have the budget to offer. So he was getting really minimal services. And one example is his developmental team suggested that he have summer services so that he wouldn't regress. And the school denied those services for budgetary restrictions.
Sure.
And he did regress quite a bit over that summer. And this was kind of the story. It was kind of one step forward, two steps back for a lot of our time, until finally when Henry was about to enter middle school, we'd had a lot of struggles, and the middle school had no programming at all to help someone like him. And we decided to take him out of public school and just try to create an individualized education program on our own, which is what we did. And it was essentially me trying to fill those gaps, which a lot of families find themselves doing. And the book is actually about how I went about filling those gaps.
Yeah, because you're not able to give him the social experience at that point. You could do the education, but
Right.
the piece that you really needed to partner with is you're going to have to work double time to do that, plus raise a family, and it's very difficult.
Yeah.
So tell us, we obviously know who the inspiration of the book was, but what was the purpose to, like, your motivating factor? Is it to teach other people how things happened, and kind of like with the book to how things could be better?
Yes, that was really my inspiration. And also for people that might be going through the same things I did, because one of the major inspirations was when I was starting to think about putting the book together, I realized that the state of Massachusetts had just updated their IEP resources for students on IEPs in the state. And it was the first time they had updated their resources in about 20 years. And it took 9 years of review to do, relatively minor updates. And it's just kind of the bureaucracy, it's a slow process to get this done. And I realized, and Massachusetts is only one of a handful of schools who have updated their resources really at all in the last 20 plus years. So there's a lot of kids that are falling through the cracks. And I realized that things were not that much better. Henry is now a college graduate, but things are really not that much better for the kids that are going through it now. And so I thought it was important to address it. And just, there's been for the last 50 years, there have been many, many proposals by politicians put forth that to fully fund idea, which I think is kind of the number one thing we have to do, is get that up to that 40% that was promised.
Sure.
And then start going from there to kind of relieve the burden on some of the local districts in the state. And there's one actually that was just introduced last week by 2 senators and a representative that they're, again, trying to put forth a proposal to fully fund it. So I felt like this is still very much a current issue, despite the fact that the book covers, the book starts, over 20 years ago, the events in the book.
And it's important to know that, just to say, as an individual education program, they're not just open a book and this is what it is. There is there's ADD, there's developmental issues, there's social. It doesn't work that way. You just can't throw a program at a child. It's individualized for a reason. That's the name of it. So the school groups, whether it's the cities or the state level, they need to really be paying attention to what the individual child's needs are.
Right.
And how it helps with the home.
Absolutely. It needs to be more of a holistic approach with both the medical team, if the family, wants that introduced, and working with the family and working with the schools and community resources. Because once I took Henry out of school, I discovered a lot of community resources that could absolutely be scaled at a level to work with the school and not have parents kind of being their own curriculum designers and trying to do it all themselves. So that is absolutely true. And also, I think we need a lot more training and, adequate staffing in the schools so they can address these individualized issues. I think it's really difficult on teachers to have a classroom of, say, 35, 40 students, many of whom have, different specific needs. Trying to meet those needs is really a lot for a teacher.
Yeah. And I know it's better than when I went to school in the 70s. And there's more focus now,
Right.
But a lot of districts, they're having to send kids to other school groups in the state.
Yeah.
One city will send us to another city because that's where they can specialize. And it's unfortunate, which incurs additional expenses of busing and monitors. And so if we look at your book, and if you hold it up and show our audience, yeah. So I love that you have the person holding Henry's hand without being seen.
Yes.
Someone there helping him.
Right.
And so you're talking through the book about how it worked with Henry.
Right.
You're giving tips for the folks who are surrounding Henry, so the family, the friends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're talking to the needs for the community as well in the school groups.
Yep.
I think it was a really well thought out approach. And I'm hoping all the folks that are watching this are really thinking about picking up a copy and really trying to understand what their role is, because it can be more than just knowing someone like Henry.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a real cultural imperative to think more inclusively in general for all people. And I think that that extends far beyond the school. It extends to like recreational sports programs. And, you know, I feel like a lot of us focus so much on winning instead of teamwork. And I think from a cultural perspective, it would be a real improvement as far as not just within the school, but outside of it, to kind of be modeling that, and as well as in the workplace. Because I had a lot of worries as to when Henry transitioned to work. I really worried about him finding the right setting where he could work at his best and reach his full potential, in a setting that is off place, is as rigid as our schools.
And unpredictable.
Right. Unpredictable, with kind of rigid rules and structure that if you don't necessarily fit that or think in that way, it can be very, very challenging.
Well, especially since, you know, if you think about it, let's say it's a social setting or it's work, like you're saying, it really is an individual approach to every encounter you have there. When people think, oh, this child has a special education program and, you know, they're going to struggle through, but, you know, if they get through the system, that's great.
Right.
It doesn't really work that way. And people need to think that they're really approaching each individual they meet with their own little plan. And I think it really kind of brings it home that situations like Henry aren't far removed from everybody else.
No.
You know, you may just adjust to it better than Henry could have without some guidance.
Right.
But I think it really is important to pay attention to what the needs are and how people like Henry can not only survive school and thrive,
Right.
and go to college, which is fantastic, and then get a career. Without some of the systems out there, that never would have happened.
Right.
Right. I think your approach to this is fantastic. I love that you call it a memoir, because it's your life.
Right.
It's Henry's life.
Right.
I'm sure he's really, really proud of himself and would probably brush that off, but I'm sure he's really proud of you to bring the light.
Yeah, and it's I call it a hybrid memoir in the sense that I infused a lot of research in it, because a lot of this, that my individual story is just a very small story in a much larger issue that affects really our you know, the whole country. Yeah. So, and some places really, you know, different parts of the country struggle more with that, or there may be less awareness, there may be less accessibility. So I really think it's important that we're kind of discussing this more. And to your point, everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and that's what we need to really understand, that the focus on, say, normal maybe isn't the way we should be thinking about things, but rather that everybody brings strengths and weaknesses, and we are talking about creating a culture where we can all complement each other with those, rather than just one path forward.
Sure. So tell people where they could find Henry's Classroom.
So Henry's Classroom is available pretty much anywhere books are sold.
Great.
And it can be purchased online at all of the major retailers, or you can order it at your local independent bookstore, which I encourage you to do. And it's also available from the press's website, which is Apprentice House Press out of Loyola University.
Okay. And we're going to make an audiobook at some point?
I haven't started that yet, but I would love to at some point.
Absolutely.
I definitely
I'm
would.
a big audiobook guy. So.
Yeah, I am too. I've listened to an audiobook while I've been commuting, and I would love to be able to do that. That would be great.
So there's a plug for famous audiobook readers.
Right.
You know, a lot of different folks. We'll put the word out. Maybe they would want to do a little bit for you.
That would be fantastic.
Sure.
I would love that.
It's the local bookstores. Henry's Classroom is the book. Amy Mackin is the author. Listen to her heart in this book and everything that Henry went through and all the resources, fantastic resources in this book that I think will help a lot of people that may be on school boards, maybe have a child that may at some point need an individual education program, or no, even if you're just supporting someone, a family member or a friend whose child is in this situation, it would be great to talk to them and open this resource up to them.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for putting your life into this book. It's going to help a lot of people.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Letting me